Hello, welcome back to my channel, everyone. This one is going to be PO number 4. And in PO number 4, I'm going to start talking about some basic things that are necessary for us to move forward and understand what the public opinion and the political outcome is a result of happening throughout the history of the world. And what I'm going to start with that is some basic understanding of what our attitude is between religious and political environments. Now, I have said in many of my videos, I am a political person, not a religious person. Now, I am 88 years old, and so I've lived for a while. But this morning I did receive an inspiration about what I think and why I think it. And that inspiration was that I am a political person and I see a difference between political people and religious people. And the difference is that a political person, in my opinion, because I am a political person, and I am generalizing that maybe more political people have the same attitude I do. But the attitude of a political person that is trying to be a person of humanity, not trying to destroy each other, not trying to wipe us off the face of the earth, but helping each and every one of us succeed, prosper, and benefit from everyone else's actions. And in order to do that, you have an attitude. And the attitude I have is that I am willing to go halfway with anyone else, and that's it. It's tit for tat. If I lean a little more than halfway, I think I've gone beyond the extra mile, and I'm only doing it to try to avoid more frustration and fighting that would be necessary to make sure that I come out equal. And I am not of an attitude that I'll put off something like that forever. I've spoken about my problem with the city of Martinez and how that changed my attitude about the American government for the rest of my life. And what that was is being treated in a way that no other human being would stand for. And they don't. That's why they become lawyers. They make sure that they do not end up in that kind of situation. Now, I have pushed for many times for women to be free and equal, and I have tied with that if they wanted to sell their body for sex, they're entitled to have the money. And as I had mentioned it before, I have a son that is a lawyer, and he is in the mediation field now. And we don't necessarily agree on everything political, but he has his opinions, and I have mine. And he says that your problem is you're looking at it from the wrong way. If you get charged with violating the law because you and the female you're with, you paid her to have sex with you, he says you're phrasing that wrong. I didn't pay her for sex. I had sex with her and she agreed to give it to me. I paid her so she would leave. Now, that is a typical way a lawyer can look at it. And it was a little humorous to me, but that is a way that a lot of our rules get framed, that people work around. The obvious attitude is allow people to say it's illegal and then try to work a way around so you can do the same act but make it in a way that is legal. Well, I want to expose some of those fallacies and some of our reasoning. And I'm going to do that by comparing it to the attitude of religious people. Now, I am a religious person. I was converted at 9 years old in a Southern Baptist church in Richmond, California, and it was Clinton Avenue Baptist Church. I've said that many times. In the 15 years of my life, I thought that all religious people were going to be religious individuals. And I knew from the very first week that God had told me, I don't want you to be a preacher or teacher. Well, it took me about 10 or 12 years to catch on to that. And once I did, my life started going the direction I thought it should have gone from the time I was 9 years old. But I delayed it because of my own actions and attitudes. Now, the reason I make that distinction is I realize now I did not have the character to be a religious person. And by that I mean I claim tit for tat. I will go halfway, and when what he's doing is wrong, in other words, I said, you don't do anything that you would want someone to do to you. So when I find people trying to steal from me, I try to resist that as much as I can because I'm not willing to be taken advantage of. Now, that is, in my opinion, a political person. If you're a religious person, Jesus teaches that you go a long way in the direction that you would not want to live or have to have your life built on, but you're doing it to help the person realize that they're doing what's wrong. And their examples are, if someone asks you to go a mile with them, go 2. If they ask for your coat, give them your shirt as well. Now, I don't have that attitude. I'm not willing to go that far. Now, I understand clearly after 88 years of life that that is probably the major reason that the Lord told me, I don't want you to be a preacher teacher. I don't have the character for it. So, since I don't have the character for it, we're going to go and explore now what it takes for a Homo sapien that wants to get along in this world needs to act. And I've said many times, and we refer to it as the golden rule, and that means that you don't do anything to anyone that you wouldn't want them to do to you. As I think about that now, I think about our education system and people saying that we don't educate our children anymore. Well, we need to get busy doing that. And by educating them, it means that you primarily have to teach them by the time they get out of high school that you don't do anything to anyone you wouldn't want them to do to you. And if we do that, then we have a successful country. We need competition with it. We need a lot of other things to work with it. But if people don't act that way, then what they need to be is at a very young age to be reprimanded, to be taught that this is not acceptable. And if they're still doing it after they turn 18, we lock them up for a few days. And we have to let them know, you are going to live in this society. You have to turn your thinking around. You are going to live in a manner that you don't cheat other people because you wouldn't want other people to cheat you. Now, I think that they need to be reprimanded at a very young age. They need to be consistently reprimanded until they see the light, and it clearly is obvious that they, by the time have graduated from high school, have understood you don't do anything to anyone else that you would not want them to do to you. Now, as we express those things, the things that we have to deal with in America are the radical Muslims now. And we've talked about some of them, and you don't even have to stop for a second and guess about how they come into the picture, because what I've already told you puts them way over the line of being a destructive Homo sapien. And we cannot tolerate destructive Homo sapiens. We can't even destruct the ones that are what I would say on the other side of the religious people, taking advantage of them because they think they can get away with it, because religious people will not require them to do things that exactly they would not want done to them. They're going the extra mile, trying to show what a loving person would do. Well, we know from that then that Jesus was a more of a loving person. He wasn't an idiot. He even said in his teaching that you will be reaping coals upon their burning tongues as they rot in hell. And that we already know every Muslim that commits murder is going to be there if he doesn't repent. Now, I speak of not repenting because when I get to heaven, I expect to have a few chats with Moses. And we know for a fact that Moses said that he was responsible for someone being killed. Now, I have already expressed that I think that that was Akhenaten's older brother that got killed in his confession, but that's my opinion that the world has not picked up on yet and gone along with. But that would be the only thing that would truly explain what Moses' life was about. Moses did not want to be an evil person, and he worked at making it go the other way. Well, we still have an Israeli race today, a group of people that calls themselves Jews or Israelites, and that was all started with Moses. Now, just as a little side note, and the reason I'm bringing up the side note is we're talking about Muslims, and the Muslims, as I said before, is really a joke. A person with a gun in his hand shooting you, you're going to be just as dead, even though the guy shooting you is a joke. And the joke is he's going to be in hell rotting for eternity because he is doing exactly what he wants to do, is to be destructive. But the reason I say it's a little bit of a joke is we've already proven there was no such thing as Muhammad. Muhammad was not an individual that ever existed. So the whole Islamic idea and attitude is a make-believe system. And when you say, well, how could they have gotten so popular? Well, they got popular because they became a group of thugs, of thieves, of murderers. Now, the mafia did the same thing, and they got very popular and strong too, until the law enforcement agencies took them down. So all of those kind of people have to be taken down by law enforcement. Every single one of them. So if we have any radical Muslim, they should be caged or killed 100%, without a doubt. Now, we have a lot of people saying that America is in a dire situation where the Muslims are starting to gain power in America. Well, that's one reason I'm doing my videos. I think that the Americans are not quite as, let's say, aware. I won't call them stupid. I'll just say they're not quite as aware of what the actions of people are going to produce. Now, a bad person, and that means an evil person, and that would mean every single radical Muslim without exception would all qualify as that in their life because of their actions. Their actions are to be destructive against other human beings, and so we need to eliminate them off the face of the planet if they can't be rehabilitated. And rehabilitated is a fancy word for we got to tell them and make them understand it's wrong to do what you're doing to other humans. And Humans are not going to tolerate it. There is a lot of people's concern about the end of Homo sapiens on the face of the planet. I have a little different attitude. I am a Christian, but I don't agree with all of my Christian brothers about everything. But in my opinion, there's never going to be a destruction of Homo sapiens on the earth. And Jesus didn't really say that. In fact, Jesus said exactly the opposite if the people wrote down correctly what Jesus said. And when he was instituting the Lord's Supper, he threw in one extra sentence, and I think I've expressed this before, that I will not do this again until I do it with you in my Father's kingdom. So the kingdom of God that's coming on earth, and Jesus said it himself, this generation will not be gone before it comes. And that's exactly what happened. And we know that not because of any of the Gospels, but in the book of Acts, as I've said before, that when Cornelius had asked for Peter to come and preach to him about Jesus, when Peter went and was preaching to the family of Cornelius in Acts 10, and he made one little half a sentence that I didn't even find until after I wrote my book, Satan's Influence in the Church, and it said, those, not everyone, but those who ate and drank with Christ after he rose from the dead. Well, if Peter's telling the truth about that statement is exactly what Jesus said would bring in the kingdom of God. So that means that the day of Pentecost, when all of these things think was a unusual situation, was actually the coming and the existence of the kingdom of God. And I have to say, I was a little slow in the uptake, and I didn't really get into it until I was 40 or 50 years old. So I had to live a lot of years before I could even realize it was here for me to take advantage of. But that also is leading to why I'm doing what I'm doing here. Because there is a difference between right and wrong. And right is when you do things that do not damage other people. And wrong is when you are doing nothing but damaging other people. Now, a lot of people say, well, everything anyone does causes some damage. Well, you can make anything to sound the way you want it to. That's why I'm using these videos. Public opinion relates to the political outcome. Now, a lot of people have had the public opinion about many things. Islamic people has a public opinion that they're all going to heaven because they are killing other people that don't believe in what they believe. Well, you know, what puts you in heaven isn't what you think. What puts you in heaven or hell is what you do. So if whatever they claim they think is of very minor significance to their actions, and if their actions are that of murder without confessing that you have sinned and you want to be forgiven of that sin and that you will never do it again, you will rot in hell for eternity. And there's going to be overwhelming amount of Muslims in hell. The thing that is even funny about that is, as I've expressed now, it's absolutely irrefutable. Muhammad did not exist, and it was all made up. And the reason you know it was totally made up is the people that were making the mistake that gave him his life story and his history and all the things he did, writing about what Muslims should do because they just copy what Muhammad did, made a critical mistake, and that was putting Muhammad in a place that was not a city at the time that he lived. It was at least 75 to 300 years later that the story was made up. And it was not a situation where people could investigate and have the history to realize if you go back at the time you're saying Muhammad lived, there was nothing there. There was no water there. There was no city there. There was nothing there. Well, if there was nothing there, the whole story about Muhammad, they saying, oh, well, they just picked the wrong place. It was a different place. It doesn't make a difference what your excuse is. The truth is still the truth. No matter how bad you wanted something else to be true, if it happened, it's true. If it didn't happen, it's not true. And that can never be changed. So what we're going to find out in these videos that I'm doing is that these kind of things, people do make mistakes. I am not criticizing people for making mistakes because I, more than anyone else, have made a lot of mistakes in my life. But all I know is you have to do the best you can, try to take away the damage that you may have done as a result of that mistake and move on, because you cannot go back and undo an action. Once you've done the action, you can apologize for acting that way and never want to do it again, but the action still occurred. It can't be changed. You can't go back and redo the world. No one has ever and ever will be able to go back in history and change anything. Now, it's been a lot of movies made about people doing that kind of thing, and they're very entertaining, but they are also very impossible. There is no such thing as time travel. You're not going to be able to go back and change anything. Once you've done it, it is done. And so therefore, you have to understand that what we want to be aware of is what are we teaching our children, because a lot of the Muslim people have to twist the children into a sadistic attitude by teaching them things that are totally false when they're young, because a lot of children will believe stupidity when they're younger. They don't know any better. They haven't had enough life experience to know when someone is selling them a bill of goods. And some people never really learn that. They are still susceptible to con artists even after they're older than I am. So what we want to do is be aware of the people around us. And if they're a crook, let's make sure they get punished for their crime. And that is why I push the attitude that we have to have a co-conspirator attitude about anyone that verbally expresses an opinion that someone follows and does something that's wrong. Then, once those people get punished a few times, Homo sapiens want to survive as well. They won't want to spend their whole adult life in jail, so they will conform even if they don't like to conform. So we don't care if people like it or don't like it. What we want are people that are going to conform to the laws of the land, whether you like it or not. And you're doing it because you don't want to be incarcerated or punished as a result of your actions. And again, that's why I'm doing the videos. Now, I'm making this point to show we have to go back, and this is the fourth one. So I've already expressed different things that we're trying to accomplish, but we have to be real clear that we have to start by making sure the people that do the actions suffer, and the people that encourage them to do the actions suffer, because human beings don't like to suffer, and that's the only thing that's going to rehabilitate them. Now, will it rehabilitate them? Well, not necessarily, but what it will probably do is to make sure they know they have to modify their actions well enough that they stay out of prison and out of being punished, because they don't like being punished. They don't like being in jail. They don't like having the punishment that comes along with the way they feel like acting. Well, I don't care if they don't like it or not. I would rather have them doing it because they feel like it's beneficial to them, because they don't want the bad consequences. I don't think that we can make that happen unless we do have bad consequences. So that means that when we're talking about how people should act, we need to understand that you have to be reasonable to understand if you don't punish people who are doing wrong, you're encouraging them to do what's wrong. And there is the only way you're going to change that is you're going to punish them for doing wrong actions, and that is lying, cheating, and stealing. And that doesn't even mention killing. That's way over the top. But it's just the minor things, the things that Christ would teach his followers to accept from other people, so they would realize on this planet there's people that love you so much that they're willing to take the short end of the straw just so you will know they love you. And I have to admit, probably that is very effective in a lot of cases. But we know very well it's not effective in all cases, because there are people who rape and murder who have already been in jail for raping and murdering. And the fact that we let them out again and they do it some more shows they haven't been rehabilitated. And if they don't get rehabilitated, they should not be let out on the street. And there has to be a policing society that is smart enough to be able to track known felons and criminals, that when they get out, that they are not capable of having the opportunity to do those things again without getting caught. And we're not going to do that with the police departments that think they're working for cities or counties or states or federal government. That's why the founders of the Constitution specifically put in that the government could have the post office, because they wanted all citizens to be able to have contact with each other, even though they were few and far between. But what we need to do now is to subcontract all of that work. And with a 2 or 3 year contract, if the people aren't doing the job, they can lose the contract even before their time is up. Because what we've taken out of the equation that has made it absolutely fail, the law enforcement are not doing a good job. They can't do a good job. There's not enough competition. If they have more competition, we would have more robots around watching people who have been criminals in the past. And if they're in the process of raping or murdering someone, it will be photographed while they're doing it, and they will immediately go back to jail. Now, just having that in the society is going to encourage a lot of felons not to act the way that they want to act, because they know they're going to get the consequences of those actions. Now, I talk about felons and people like that because this is a civilized society. So it goes without question that anyone that is a radical Muslim will be subjected to the worst environment of any felon that ever existed. This is going to be the end of PO number 4. And if you would tell your friends, I'd appreciate it. If you subscribe to my channel, I'd appreciate it. And you can share the truth that I'm trying to share with you with other people. And when one individual did not end up in hell that would have been there without your input, you have done a benefit for humanity. And with that, I'm going to say this is the end of PO number 4. I hope to see you in PO number 5. And goodbye for now.